Three, two, one. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to Baseball Outside the Box. Thanks for joining us, folks. We appreciate it. It is a beautiful day here in Chicago. Friday. It is April 30th, and we are going to have a fantastic show. Before we start, don't forget, do us a favor. Go to baseballoutsidethebox.com for the audio. Hey, YouTube, Peter Caliendo, and do us a favor and subscribe to both of those. That really helps the show get out. Remember, we keep telling you, thank you so much for all you do, our listeners. We're in over 100 countries, coaches and players and parents listening to us. Special thanks to ESPN Honolulu for broadcasting the show. We really appreciate that. We are just trying to get great baseball information out there. And today we got a great baseball show for you. Hey, we're going to delve into, think about this, in the scene, what we call the backside of being a general manager. I mean, think about it. One, how do you become a general manager in Major League Baseball? Two, all the behind the scenes things that happen to create that winning culture. I mean, this is going to be an outstanding show. And we got one of the best in the business. Hey, by the way, National Italian American Sports Hall of Fame, Hall of Famer, inductee. And, he's been inducted in other Hall of Fames, but, I'm going to mention the Italian one because he is Italian American. And he's a great person. He's an author. I mean, you're talking about an analyst. He's got 3 Emmys, award-winning Emmys for baseball analyst. He started off in the PR department, I believe, communications department with the Cubs. We're going to get into all that background because he's got so much of it. 40 years in the game of baseball. Imagine if he was 40 days and accomplished all that, we'd really have a hit. Let me welcome from California now, but a Chicago native, Ned Colletti. What's up, Ned?
Hey, Peter, great to be with you. Great to be here, pal.
I told you I mess up once in a while on a podcast. 40 days would be awesome, wouldn't it?
There were some days that seemed like 40 days.
Yeah. Love it. Well, first of all, congratulations on an incredible career. And I want to delve into it because I've heard you mention a few things in articles, and I want to go back into your childhood, growing up in Chicago. Your parents, modest, household, really, from what I read. You even said what I thought was really interesting. We'll get into it. You weren't an Ivy League guy, and so I want you to talk about that because the show's going to be about what it takes not only to be a GM, but to, withstand yourself in the game of baseball for a long period of time, how you did it early on and then, all the way to GM.
Okay. Well, I'll start with my parents, and this is a tough week for me because they both died 31 years apart. One on the 27th of April many years ago, one on the 29th of April many years ago. So it's always a bit of a tough week for me. But I've been blessed way beyond measure, Peter, in my life and my career. My parents were married in 1951, and they moved into a garage. And they took a garage. My dad did. My dad was very handy. It's a factory worker, and remodeled his brother-in-law's garage. And that's where my parents lived for a decade. I came along halfway through that decade. My younger brother, Doug, who does Bears radio for 35 years. By the time my brother Doug was born, we had moved uptown. We had moved to Franklin Park and had a 2-bedroom house, a 4-room 2-bedroom house, which was a mansion compared to living in a garage. But that's where we started. And my parents taught me work ethic. They taught me integrity. They taught me to give as much as I could to as many as I could. My father in his last days, and he died a young man at 51 years of age in Chicago. One of his last words to me were, "You're going to find out in life that it's far better to give than to receive, and your life will be blessed even more by more you give than what you take." And my mom, they were married 31 years. My mom died 31 years. She was married 31, was a widow for 31. She died a few years back. And in her last days, I asked her for some advice like my dad had given me. And she said, be a blessing to somebody every day. You don't need to know them, but just try to be kind every day and be a blessing to somebody every day. And as I look at the world today, boy, what great messages. If we could, as a society, as a world, take heed of that. But I was smart enough to know at a young age that while I loved baseball and I loved hockey and other sports, I was smart enough to know that I wasn't going to be able to make a living playing. So I went to East Leiden High School, and I was the first in my family to go to college. But my parents wanted me to go, but they really didn't have the roadmap to have me set forth a plan to get there. I didn't even know we had a college counselor in high school until maybe 6 weeks before I was due to graduate.
Wow.
And there's a lot of people that graduate, top 10% of their class, or top 2%. I was if we were given our diplomas based upon class rank in a class of about 500, if the ceremony started on a Tuesday night, I'd be getting mine sometime Friday. I was so far down in class rank. There was no 4-year school who would accept me.
Wow.
So I went to JC route. I went to Triton Junior College route. I didn't have a ton of confidence. I didn't have really the confidence to speak a lot and to engage a lot in conversation. But I did pay attention. And I grew up in a neighborhood where you needed to pay attention. Good neighborhood, hardworking people, but the hustle was on almost every day from somebody.
Yeah.
So you needed to know how to negotiate as a kid, and what was true and what was false, and to be able to read people, which has served me for decades now. That education that didn't lead me to an Ivy League school, or didn't even lead me to a 4-year university until I had 2 years of a JC behind me. Those lessons, which I thought put me really behind my competition as I started to grow up and look at a career, actually have served me very well. Everything I've done, and I find it interesting. I teach at Pepperdine now, and I find a school that they wouldn't let me drive by Pepperdine. Pepperdine is like the University of Chicago or Northwestern in the Chicago area. They wouldn't let me stop at the bookstore at those places to get a T-shirt.
Yeah.
They tell me to keep on driving, But I find that I use every aspect of life when you teach and when you try to help people out, because you've been through so many different things that perhaps those that had it better off as a young person, didn't have that opportunity. I think we learned.
And it's interesting because I'll tell you, as I listen to you talk, there's a lot of little nuggets in there about how to be successful. Likewise, my parents came from Italy. They came here. My dad came here not knowing many people, had to start a life, then had to bring my mom over, the struggles behind that. Then because of some issues, with my brother and I, they sent me over to Italy at 3 years old, with a flight attendant. You and I were talking with us off the air. And growing up in Elmwood Park, great neighborhood, but like you said, can be tough at times. I mean, you grow up fast, you're out, you're outdoors with your buddies all the time, growing up. There's a lot to say about that. Nothing, I don't want to take it away from education, but there's a lot to say about those street smarts, how you carry them into your career. And that looks like it really happened for you. I mean, I guess my question with this would be, mixing the two, the street smarts with the school work that you're doing, because what did you go into when you were in college? Was it
journalism? I wanted to be a sports writer. Yep.
Yeah. So talk about how you mix those two.
Yep. Well, I think learning comes every day, and I don't think I don't think you need a school just to learn. I don't think you just need the street or buddies just to learn. I think you learn every day. Part of the reason I love sports after 40 years in baseball is because I'll watch a game, and I watch, probably 200 games a year still. I learn something every day, as I'm sure you do being involved in baseball. You see something every day. You learn about the game or you learn about people. So I think, that has served me well, because again, I had no chance as a 17, 18-year-old kid. I was going nowhere. And I had to figure out how to learn. I had to figure out how to use whatever qualities and experiences I had. I needed to figure that out. What I did is I graduated from Northern Illinois University with a degree in journalism, and I wrote sports for a few years. Then my dad got sick, and I was living in Philadelphia. We had just had our first child, our son Lou, and we were living in Philly when my dad got sick, and my mom had never driven a car. We were obviously not affluent, and lived in a garage and in this little house in Franklin Park, 4 rooms. And so In December of 81, I had a 18% mortgage on a house I had just bought 2 months earlier because I was going to become a dad. And my goals as a 15, 16-year-old were not to be the GM of the Dodgers or not to work for the Cubs, my hometown team, or not to move to California, work for the Giants or teach at Pepperdine or write books or win Emmys. No, my goal was that if I was blessed to have a family, my kids would be able to go to school. And my other goal was I wanted to have a mortgage and not rent. So when I became a dad, I wanted my son, as it turned out, we had a son first, to come home to a home, not an apartment. And so I had this massive mortgage. My wife had quit work. My dad was dying of lung cancer. My mom, the love of each other's life back in Chicago, was struggling to help him and get back and forth from Franklin Park to the Oak Park Hospital, which was a train ride, a bus ride away.
Yeah.
And then I lose my job.
Wow.
The newspaper folds right before Christmas. And so I have no income. And I've used every nickel I had saved, couple $1,000, to put down on this $40,000 duplex in Philadelphia. And I was struggling. I was really struggling between my dad dying, between becoming a parent for the first time, being away from my family when they were going through a tough time, and losing work. But I got very, very blessed with Bob Ibach, who you may know, and Bob went from Philly to Chicago and got a job with the Cubs in public relations and publications. Called me and said, look, I've got a job open in both of these departments. I run them both. Might have 50 people in line for both of them, but I'll give you an interview if you want. Wow. And I said, could I talk? He said, they're going to pay $13,000 a year. And I'd been making, my wife and I were making about 30 combined in Philly. And then when she stopped work to become a mom, I was making about 19. But now, I was taxed to the max with the mortgage I was paying at 18%. I had no wiggle room. And when he said 13,000 a year, I was like, whoa, I didn't even have the job yet. But it was like, how am I going to do this? I can remember my checks were for $501 twice a month. So I was clearing $1,002. Wow. And my mortgage and taxes in Philly were 800 and something. Wow. So I was like, I was in a tough spot, but that was a good time. Before that, I didn't even have the gig. So I had no income and that type of overhead. So I said, could I talk to Dallas Green for a minute? And he goes, yeah, I can probably arrange that, but don't ask him about money. We have more than enough candidates. You're lucky that you're going to get an interview. I said, okay, I get it. So I get Dallas on the phone, and, I knew of Dallas, but I really didn't know Dallas. And as you remember, 6'5", tough guy, beautiful heart guy, was great leader and a great man. And I said, hey, thanks for letting me talk to you for a minute. I'd like you to consider two things. And he says, don't ask me about money, because we can hire whoever we want to hire. If you're going to go there, don't do it. I said, well, I just need you to think about two things. And he says, what's that? I said, I would like you to consider, if I get this opportunity, paying me $15,000 a year and $1,000 to move back home. And he stops me right there. And he says, I told you, don't ask me about money. And I said, I asked you for a minute. Okay, I got 30 seconds left. I got one more thing I need you to consider. And he says, all right, go for it. I mean, he was turned off completely. I said, the 13,000 and 1,000 to move me back home, and I'll do both jobs. That'll save you money. It'll give me a chance to breathe a little bit, the $2,000 extra dollars, and the 1,000 to move me back home, and you'll save hiring somebody, their insurance, all the things that go in when you hire somebody. And he said, I'll call you tomorrow. Kind of stopped him in his tracks. Came in the next day, talked to Bob, and interviewed for the both jobs and got him.
Wow.
And got 15,000 and 1,000 to move back.
I got to ask you, because, what a great story. And I'll tell you why, because here we are, we're talking about adversity. And first of all, our listeners probably don't know what 18% interest is on a house, because we haven't seen that in I don't know how many years.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, obviously. But the second point is, look, again, all due respect to universities, you're not learning that negotiation tactic in a university. That's coming from the streets. That's coming from growing up as a young kid in the area you grew up in. I mean, and without that, you may not even have a job. And the other, I guess the question too, Bob called you. What were you doing prior to that? Did it happen right away, or were you trying to get something else out there?
It was the newspaper, the Philadelphia Journal closed maybe December 10th or 12th. And we were coming up on Christmas holidays, and the newspaper business was scuffling. I tried to get another, I was covering hockey, covering the Philadelphia Flyers. I was trying to get another hockey writing job, but the season's in the middle of the season. I mean, you know, there's nobody out there looking for a hockey writer when the season's 40 games in. I talked to people in Washington, D.C. and Buffalo, New York, and then Bob, who really rescued me.
Wow.
And that made a difference. It's I always, and I teach this a lot now. A lot of people have great degrees and great GPAs, have done incredible work, and maybe have wonderful internships and all this experience. At the end of the day, the way I believe people end up getting opportunity and getting hired is unless they know somebody. If it's just a clear-cut race to see who's going to get hired, is how are you different? How are you different than the other people sitting in that lobby?
Yeah.
What do you bring? And I didn't write down that I was going to tell Dallas Green what I told him. It just kind of showed up out of nowhere. Probably divine intervention in my life. But it changed my entire life. I got to come home. I got to be with my dad his final months. I got the job January 3rd of 82. My dad died end of April 82. I got to spend the last 90 days of my dad's life with him. Got to help my mom, got to keep my brother who was going to Northern Illinois, got to keep him in school. My dad got to meet the only grandchild he would ever know, and he got to meet his namesake, our oldest, Lou, who's, was a couple months old. And I got a chance to come back, and it was rugged. Don't get me wrong. Watching your parent die at a young age, really, really a struggle and a hard part of my life. And I'm still living in Philly. I mean, I had an apartment in Schiller Park, but I still had this mortgage in Philly, and who was buying a house at 18% interest? Wow. So it took a while to manage all of that, and a little bit of that.
Ned, there's something to say about that adversity. I know it's,
No
tough
doubt.
times, but how many stories have I heard of individuals who had it rough when they were younger, but it really taught them so much. And obviously a loss of a parent is very difficult at a young age. But it taught them so much in the real life and got them where they are today. You got your parents, you've got somebody like Bob Ibach who makes that phone call. But were there any others throughout your life, because everything you talked about also relates to anything in life, whether you're a coach, whether you're whatever you're doing in life, it helps. But were other people who were influential in your career that kind of got you, where you're at today?
So, yeah, many. Nobody does it alone. And you got to, from my perspective, you always have to be respectful and listen to people. Dallas Green was a great mentor of mine. Lee Elia, who was the first manager I worked with in Chicago and who I still stay in touch with. When I went to San Francisco, Dusty Baker, who managed the club. Bob Quinn, who was my general manager in San Francisco. Then Brian Sabian, who was the assistant GM. And a couple of years after I went to San Fran, he moved up to the GM role, of which he's had a Hall of Fame career, not just a good career, but a Hall of Fame career. And I moved up the assistant director job. And then I came to LA, and Frank McCourt, who was kind of vilified here in LA, and he went into bankruptcy and, went through a really, really tough time. But, he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot about business. He taught me a ton about negotiation, kind of rounded off my negotiation skills. And so, there's been a lot of people in my life that Dr. John Watson at Pepperdine, I had no idea how to do a lesson plan, how to write a syllabus, how to do anything like that. I had no teaching background. I teach 2 nights a year at UCLA and USC on the art of negotiation. Okay. But that's not a class. I'm not giving a grade. I'm talking about what I do,
Yeah.
And so Dr. Watson said, look, if you want, we'd love to have you here. If you come here, I'll mentor you on all these different aspects. And so, he's taught me so many different things, and you never know when this is going to happen. I was I was 61 years old, 62 years old, taking on new gigs I'd never done before.
Yeah.
But I had paid attention through it, and I had networked. Networking is another thing that's really important. Again, I was a quiet guy with not a lot of confidence. I had to learn to network. But without that network, it's a struggle. You have to have, Peter, you have to have more advocates than your buddies, your friends, your family, or even your teachers. You need advocates on the outside who will stand up and say, you know what? I like this Caliendo guy. This guy, you know what? He came to work here. He's the first guy here. He's the last person to leave. I trust him with everything. He does this, he does that. He's got a great feel for dealing with people. People need advocates on the outside, not just relatives or people that they've known for a long time. So,
it takes
being able to do that.
And you know what? I was laughing a little bit because as soon as you mentioned the universities, I was thinking I was just in Russia a couple of years ago doing a coaching seminar, and one of the guys said, "Hey, can you come over and teach a class in sports marketing at the university? Just for that evening for about a couple hours." And I've never been one to say no. And sports marketing, it's really not my background, but I have started a business in baseball, and so I figured, yeah, why not? Let's give it a shot, right? And I did it, and it was a lot of fun. And I just, like you, gave the experiences I had and why, I've done certain things and how I did them. But I guess, and the question here is, a lot of times we tend to have a little fear. We may not take that risk. I mean, when somebody says, "Hey, would you like to do this?" Just because we don't have a background, we don't take the risk. I mean, but we really should, and maybe do our homework, but we really should take that chance.
That's a great point. And this is exactly why I thank God that I grew up how I grew up, because I've been through tough times in my life. I've had cancer a couple times. I've buried both my parents. I've had my challenges, like many people do. I've been told, no, I'm not good enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not Ivy League enough. I've been told, not analytical enough. I've been told a million times I'm not good enough, which I use as motivation. But I think, to your point, that the challenges of when I grew up, where I grew up, almost made me fearless going forward. Because just growing up where I grew up was difficult. Yeah. We had no money every Wednesday. My dad worked hard in the factory. And we had a little delicatessen, they call them delis now, Alan Joe's Delicatessen. Yeah. Right at the base of the Manheim Bridge in Franklin Park. They were great guys. They gave my parents credit. A little index card box on underneath the cash register. They had your name, and prices weren't high, but still you didn't have any money. It doesn't matter how high it is. You still can't afford it. $3, $2, $1.50. And every Wednesday, every Friday, my dad got paid. He'd go right to Ellen Joe's and give them what he owed them. And wow. So, growing up to me was the challenge. Getting out of the kind of life my father and my uncles and aunts had. And they were great people. This is not a knock on them, but they aspired. I asked my dad one time, so is this enough for you? You come home, you work all day hard in a factory, you come home, you have a bottle of Pepsi as your treat, and you go to sleep and you do it again. You take maybe a little bit of a vacation, maybe every other year, where you'll drive to Florida. You're not flying anywhere.
Wow.
And is this it? And he says, when I was growing up and I wanted to have a family, I wanted to have a home. Even though this was a garage and now it's a 4-room house, we had a home. I wanted kids to be good people and to understand work ethic and to have a chance to be a dad. He says, I have everything. I have everything. Wow. And but I aspired for more. And so, but that foundation that they set and how I grew up, it made me fearless to take on new opportunities. And I look at this all the time. If I were to go back every 3 years of my life, okay, go back to 3 years earlier, 3 years earlier, and go all the way back to when I was 15, 12 years old, whatever, and looked at the 3-year increments, what had changed in my life. There's not one thing I could have predicted from 3 years back to the next 3 years. It's all unpredictable. And wow. You have to be fearless. You have to be wise. You have to listen. You have to pay attention. But you cannot be afraid of challenge. challenge is what makes you great. I've learned so much from adversity. All I've ever learned from celebration is how much I can drink or how much I can't drink, right? But you learn from it. You learn from defeat. You learn, as my brother told me, there's an old saying, that he works with the Bears, that they say probably far too much with the Bears, but, never lose the lesson. Whenever you get beat, never lose the lesson. And so most of my education has been out of defeat, been out of adversity, been out of things that didn't go the way I thought they should or the way I had it planned. That's life. That's life. But I've learned it a lot.
I got to tell you, those are incredible points. And, the thing I was thinking about was, here you are, folks, if you didn't know, first of all, Ned started, as he said, in the communications department with the Cubs, made it all the way up to general manager. Okay. So you made as general manager and you learned throughout your career how to become a better general manager, obviously, or you learned why you were going there. But you're scouting hockey. You're announcing, you're an analyst for, Major League Baseball, and you got 3 Emmys. You've never done any of that stuff. I could see the general manager part because you built into that. How did you feel comfortable that you could do the other 2?
Well, that's a great question. I knew I wanted to. I was 60 years old when the GM gig stopped, and I knew I had a lot of energy left. And I knew that I love life. And I love challenge, and I love learning, and I love being around people. And so the Dodgers asked me if I would do TV. I'd probably been interviewed 1,000 times by then, but I had never interviewed anybody except for a job, but not on a live media. And so they said, "We think you'd be great. You know what you're talking about. That's the first part." So I said, "All right, I'll do it." So I did it. And then the Pepperdine thing showed up. It was. Again, networking. I told you, I speak at UCLA and USC from time to time on negotiation. So somebody who I know from the LA Rotary Club says, "Hey, would you come and speak to the Rotary Club?" I said, "Sure." I speak to the Rotary Club. Not getting paid for it. Not an easy thing to do as far as where you got to go, how you got to park, how you got to, the whole deal. And LA traffic, it's an hour and 10-minute long program that's going to take you 5 hours to accomplish, and I went and he was there, and he said, and he also is the marketing person at Pepperdine. He said, "Would you do this at Pepperdine?" I said, "Sure." I had no idea. I went and I talked to Pepperdine students and faculty for an hour and a half. There was also the president of the university and the provost and the dean of the communications school that he had invited, unbeknownst to me. A couple of weeks later, they said, "We'd like to have lunch with you." I said, "About what?" I don't owe you any tuition money. I didn't go to school. I didn't steal any books, And they said, no, we got to talk to you. So I had lunch with them, and they asked me if I would consider teaching. And I looked at them. I says, I couldn't get into a 4-year school when I was 18 years old. Now you want me to teach at your school? It's one of the top 50 schools in the country.
Absolutely.
It's a phenomenal educational institution and great people. I said, well, I don't know. I guess so. Wow. And then the hockey thing, I spent a lot of my time in sport, my whole life, really, except for family and God. There's nothing else I've ever really done. And I had made a lot of friends in the NHL, probably 4 to 5, 6 people. John McDonough, I'm sure with the Blackhawks. He and I worked together with the Cubs. Jay Blunk, same thing, both with the Hawks. Won 3 cups there together. Brian Burke, Tony Granato, Downers Grove. Tony Granato and I are very good friends. Doug Wilson, former Hawk. I've known Doug for years, and numerous other ones. Dean Lombardi, Ronnie Hextall, on that I've made contact with during the winter, and ask questions, and they would ask me questions. Because unless you sit in those type of seats, the GM role, the assistant GM role, there's nobody else you could really talk to about what you're going through, because people don't understand it. It's such a unique group. There's only so many people you can lean on, and only so many people you can ask advice from, and really have the courage to ask advice from. And so I had built up probably a dozen people in another sport that I'm passionate about how you do things, how do you think, how do you do this, how do you do that. they'd ask me the same questions. I would meet with Brian Burke when he was running Anaheim, and I'm living in the South Bay of LA. We meet at 5 a.m. to get away from the traffic and take a 2-hour, 3-hour walk and have breakfast about issues he was going through, issues I was going through. We're both successful. He was winning cups, I was winning divisions, you know? And so it was that type of thing. And so when the GM gig ended, I talked to a handful of GMs who asked me, hey, would you ever want to work in hockey? And I says, yeah, when the time is right. And I've known Doug Wilson and Doug Jr., who's in charge of scouting. There was an intern for me, no doubt, at one point in time. Think about that. My boss now is a former intern of mine. So everybody listening, if you have an intern, be good to your interns.
Absolutely.
Also, hire good ones, hire good interns, because you may be working for them one day.
You're right.
Joe Will, who's been there since the franchise began.
Yeah.
It began with friendships, and then they knew that they could count on me and trust me. And as time went on, you know, they came to me and they said, we'd like you to do this. I said, I'm honored. Let's go. You know,
I love the things you say, because, you know, first of all, you mentioned ethics. You're mentioning a lot about listening skills, asking questions. I mean, those are so critical. I think sometimes we take those for granted. And folks, if you're on Facebook, thanks for joining us. Got a lot of people. If you got any questions for Ned, just type them in the comment section. We will be hopefully next week or the week after be able to take calls right on the podcast. Ned, when did you know, as a GM, when did you know you were ready for it, and what gave you that indication?
Well, that's a great question. We talked about mentors earlier in the show, and I mentioned Brian Sabean. Brian Sabean and I are from the same era. Okay, he was with the Yankees when I was with the Cubs, and he's really brilliant at what he does, and quiet but brilliant. And he, as the assistant to him, I was the assistant GM. He was the GM of the Giants. He wasn't territorial. He gave me opportunity. I negotiated probably 99% of the contracts there, including a handful with Barry Bonds and Jeff Kent. He let me make trades.
There goes the negotiation skills again.
Hey, it's part of everyday life. You know, let me make trades. The managers and I, whether it was Dusty Baker, who I love, and Felipe Alou, another tremendous manager and friend, to have one-on-one conversations with them. He let me see it. I talked to the media all the time. So he didn't close a door because he was insecure or he, you know, was territorial. And so as time went on, I knew that I was being able to be exposed to a lot of the decision making that you need to be able to do in that position, and the experiences of working in the minor leagues and being in player development. Used to go to minor leagues all the time. Used to scout all the time under Sabean, who was one of the greatest scouts in the last 30 years in the sport. And so I paid attention, and I knew that I was ready probably halfway through my Giants career. A lot of people think they're ready, like we're ready. You know, right now they're 18 years old. They're going to graduate. Right. I could be the GM today of such and such a team. You know, maybe, I don't know, but I don't think that that's probably likely. And I just got exposed to everything, and I thought I would have a chance. I had 2 other opportunities before the Dodgers, but I didn't believe either franchise was really passionate enough about winning. And I told people I would rather be the number 2 person in San Francisco with an organization that is passionate about winning and putting on an entertaining product than I would being the number 1 person on a team that was trying to win half the games and you know, not really compete for a championship. I only want to compete for championships. It's not arrogance. I just want to stretch for the top. I want to compete against the best and stretch for the top. So, you know, I kind of knew then. And then you have to wait for the right opportunity, and the opportunity may never come. And I know there's a lot of people that get impatient. You're going to have great patience if you're going to get in the sports world. Great patience. There's not a lot of jobs. It takes time, and it takes patience and awareness. You may go to sleep 1,000 days wondering, when am I going to ever get an opportunity? You know what? Day 1001, you may meet somebody for 5 minutes or run into an old acquaintance or somebody who you had a good rapport with that you worked with, who now has advanced and may be looking for somebody in their own organization. And boom, suddenly that path opens up for you. So you've got to be prepared every day, knowing that for who knows how many days, you put your head on a pillow end of the day and thank God for the day ahead. But nothing, as you can tell, opened up your career to a greater future. So one day it will.
Yeah, love it, folks. Hey, folks, just think about it. As the general manager, you're not just making trades. I mean, listen to Ned. You're talking about salaries, negotiations, media. There's so much behind being a general manager. And I guess the question I've always had, with the Dodgers, Dodgers financially have always had finances to be able to do certain things.
Not always.
But they've been successful.
Nope.
My question is there ever a conversation with ownership? This is just a personal question that I've always wanted to ask. Has there ever been a conversation with ownership, especially like if I'm an owner and let's just say hypothetically a certain team has a lot of money, but not really being successful. They're kind of getting there, but they're not really winning. And I'm looking at the Rays and I'm looking at Oakland and I'm looking at some other clubs and I'm saying, wait a second, what are we doing wrong here? I mean, I'm spending $200 million. These guys are spending $65 million and they're beating us or maybe doing better or just as good as us. Can we do something different, and maybe not spend as much and find out what they're doing better? Has that ever come up, that kind of?
Always. Yeah. And I don't think it's just relegated to Major League Baseball. I think in any corporation setting, you're thinking about that. Everything I've ever done, everything I've ever observed, it's all about the people. Life is a people business.
Yeah.
And business is people.
Yes.
And selecting the right ones, selecting those that are passionate about what they do, will not take the easy way out. Money does not guarantee success. Okay. The right process, the right passion, the right fortitude, sacrifice, fierceness, integrity doesn't guarantee success either, but brings you a whole lot closer than just writing checks. Just because you write a check don't mean you're going to win anything.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you have to pick the right people. We did it in San Francisco when Brian first took over. We lost 95, 96 games the year before he became the GM, and we didn't have many players. And we went out and brought in players that had a chip on their shoulder, who played hard, who refused to get beat. Jeff Kent, JT Snow, Rich Aurelia a couple years after that, 2002, David Bell, who now runs Cincinnati. These guys were tough, boy. They were tough gamers. Kirk Reeder, Robbie Nen, in the pitching, Mark Gardner. They hated defeat. They loved to win, don't get me wrong, but they hated defeat more than they loved to win. And so they continued to do it. And none of these guys came in. We had Barry Bonds and we had Matt Williams for a little while. Those were superstar players. But we were not a team of superstars. We were a team of hardworking people who laid it out there every day for the good of the group. And won. We won a ton of games, went to a World Series, got beaten Game 7.
Yeah.
I left, came to LA. They went on to win 3 more. We just won our first in LA a couple of years ago. I've spent probably the last 4 years of my career, probably been to the postseason 18 times.
Wow.
That's a lot in baseball because not everybody, it's not like the old phone book used to be where you got to ask not to be included. It's tough in the postseason.
And that's a great point about the 18, playoff appearances. Think about it. The question would be there to sustain the culture and the winning atmosphere of a major league team. You've got to have a continuous successful minor league system. Talk about that a little bit.
That's a great point. It's actually it's a class that I teach at Pepperdine, organizational behavior. How do you build an organization that the players almost become interchangeable? But the foundation is consistent so that you can win 3 out of 5 World Series, or you can, like Bobby Knight won all those titles. Bobby Knight, I talked to a couple summers ago. In a 13-year stretch, he won 3 NCAA basketball titles, an NIT, an Olympic gold, Pan American Games. He had 84 different players. But you set a foundation of what your expectations are. And it's not, while a foundation is typically concrete, it has no flexibility to it. You do have to have flexibility to it, but you set the right things in place and you don't vary to accept players that refuse to exist inside the operation. And it doesn't mean they can't wear their hair long or have a beard or do these other things. It's not like that type of style, but you have to select the right people to do it. And then you've got a chance to be successful for a long time, no matter who the players are. The Dodgers have won 8 straight divisions and been to 3 of the last 4 World Series. The players from my last 2 teams, the 13 team and the 14 team, there's a couple guys left, but most of them are new. And some of the guys we drafted who fit the right culture have become stars of this group. But they weren't in the big leagues when I left. Corey Seager, 2 MVPs last year. One of our #1 draft picks when I was there. Cody Bellinger, 4th round pick, National League MVP. On and on and on. Plus Clayton and Kenley Jansen and Justin Turner, guys that I drafted and signed. And Kenley's changed position. He was a catcher that probably wasn't going to hit in the big leagues. And he and I argued about it all the time and still argue about it. I said, you're lucky I made you a relief pitcher. You've made millions of dollars and you're the all-time great save guy, even though you fought me and you wanted to be the catcher. Baseball would need 80 teams for you to be the catcher.
What did you see in that? What made you think that decision? I mean, his arm or what was
his arm strength, his knowledge of pitching, being a catcher.
Yeah.
And I just thought that he could do it. He converted begrudgingly, but within a year, he was in the big leagues. Within a year, he was in the big leagues.
I hope
he had thrown 12 innings and we put him on the major league roster because we had a lot of faith in him. And he exceeded we had huge expectations and he exceeded all of them.
Wow.
Champion.
I hope he sent you a little check every month,
No check, but I get a high sign every so often. Whenever he gets a hit, like sometimes relief pitcher will hit late in the game, and a couple of years ago, I think he had a couple of hits. I get a notice. See, I told you I could hit.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Ned, what's the difference between being a general manager when you were GM and now? What do you think the differences are more than anything?
Well, it's from a distance that I make the comment. It's very much more analytical. People look at numbers all the time, and I actually developed the first analytical system for the Cubs back in the mid '80s. Archaic by today's standards. I mean, very archaic by today's standards, but it was still kind of cutting edge at that point in time. I think it's important. I think analytics are very important, but maybe because of how I grew up, I think who's inside the jersey is a little bit more important than the numbers. If I was judged on my analytics as a high school senior and as an early collegiate and then on, if analytics, we would not even know each other. I would not have had the career I had if I was all due on analytics. It's been due on opportunity and trust too. I think that's a major piece of it. I think the best organizations combine analytics with old school scouting, as it were. I don't know a successful team that doesn't use analytics. I also don't know a successful team organization that doesn't look inside the player to figure out who is this person? How do they sacrifice? How do they compete? What are they passionate about? Is money going to change them? All these different things that you have to ask questions of. John Sherholtz, the great general manager of the Braves, was in the Baseball Hall of Fame. When I got the job in LA in November of 2005 as a GM, he called me to congratulate me. I probably knew John 20 years at that point, 15 years. I said, give me one thing. Give me one piece of advice, if you don't mind. He said, I always ask myself, can I trust the player? And it's a great question. Doesn't mean you're trusting them to watch your house if you're out of town or things like that, but do you trust? And it doesn't just set forth for your top of the line players. It's anybody. Do you trust? Do you trust somebody, the 25th man or the 26th man on today's roster? Do you trust that utility infielder that every day you're going to get all they have to give with a clear mind and a strong will? And, things like that. Tough to see that on an analytics page.
Yeah, and I heard, I was listening to Epstein in Chicago, the GM here at the time, and he was talking about in the newspaper, that there's plenty, all the players that you're drafting, the top players are all pretty good. Their major issue was that they want to make sure, and you hit it on it, and that is that you're selecting players with character. I mean, if you don't have good character, why are we having these guys on our team? the other part of this, you mentioned listening. I want to go back just for a second. We got about 10 more minutes. I really appreciate your time because I know we're doing 3 sports. I'm sure you don't have much time here. When we're talking about listening, as a GM, you've got a lot of people around. You got to make decisions on trades, a lot of different things. Sometimes it can be hesitant being in a room with a general manager and you really want to voice your opinion on something. So that's why it's so important to be open, right? I mean, are most GM, right? Maybe not the question of most GMs like that, but is that tough to do as a general manager to really tell your people, just tell me what you think?
You have to. You have very little chance of success if you don't. And this goes, again, more than just baseball or hockey. This is in life. Any position of leadership, you need to be able to listen. I've learned far more from listening. I've learned nothing from talking. And I encourage debate. I encourage, even in class now, in school, I encourage conversation. You can't be in one of the classes I teach and not speak and not communicate somehow, way or form. You have to. And give us your opinion. And I think it's an imperative that GMs listen. You listen in negotiations. You listen to learn. And you also, when you have a staff, when they have a chance to speak, you're empowering them. So, I mean, that usually instills, maybe it's a little bit of nervousness at the outset, but as time goes on, it really instills courage in them and brings out the best in them. I think one of my responsibilities as a teacher or as a general manager, as a leader, is to have everybody who is in that organization that I have communication with and as part of the department or even borderline part of the department, that I allow them and give them the opportunity to be as great as they can be. That's imperative on a leader. That is imperative. If they're shy, you gotta let them know they don't need to be shy. You've got to be able to have them express themselves, classy, dignified, respectful, always on both sides of a conversation. But you have to do that, in my opinion. And I didn't always have people in my life that did that. I had some leaders that were brutal.
Right.
And, and sometimes we don't ever want to be working for somebody who's not good, who doesn't lead, who's selfish, who's territorial, all those different things. We all know who people are like that. But you know what they did? They taught me how not to be. As much as I hated the moments I was there and didn't like how I was being treated or didn't like this or didn't like that, I thought, you know what? I'm here for a reason. I've only got so many days on earth. I'm not going to waste any of them, including the ones that are the tough ones that the people are, behave different than I wish they would. I'm going to learn from them. Some things that I'll take with me as a good thing. Majority, I'll take with me as I will never treat anybody like this because now I know what it feels like, and I would never do that to an employee. So, you learn all the time if you're paying attention. And so many people don't want to go through the tough time.
Right.
It's hard. Don't get me wrong. I didn't look forward to it, but I also didn't waste. I didn't waste it. I couldn't waste it. One more thing I'd like to say, Peter, is you talk about GMs and leadership and things like that. And this is where Brian Sabian may be the best of all time in my career. There's one thing to make a decision. And all of us, no matter what we're doing, we are making decisions every day.
Mm-hmm.
Some major, some not as major. But we're making decisions pretty much every day. And it's not just a decision and whether it's a good decision or the wrong decision. It's when you make a decision. Because timing is like listening and research and preparation and the courage of saying no inside of a negotiation. All those things are important. But the timing is as important as anything. And when we make decisions, understand when it is to make the decision. Brian Sabian and I talked almost every day for 11 years about our team, the Giants. We might have talked 360 days a year for 11 years, taking different sides. Let me talk. Let me have a different opinion. One of us would take an opinion one day. We come back the next day and we'd be reversed on our thought process to challenge thought, to challenge opinion. Iron sharpens iron to get to the right decision. But many times we'd be sitting in Scottsdale in spring training and I'd say, hey, I got an idea. How about if we did this and that and this and that? And he'd just kind of look at me and never respond, right? And then in November, he'd say, you remember in February in Scottsdale, you came to me and you had that idea? I said, yeah, I remember. You didn't say nothing. He goes, well, I was listening. He goes, now's the time.
Wow.
And his ability to know now is the time trumped everybody I was ever around.
You know,
and that's a huge part of decision making.
And I thought that the tough part would be dealing with the decision, what sometimes was not a good decision. How do you deal with that? But man, the timing aspect is critical.
Well, again, if you've spent the time and if you have people, your staff around you that you trust, and you cultivate their thought process and you cultivate conversation. And I never wanted any yes people around me who would just say what I would always speak last. Sabian would always speak last, unless it's just the two of us.
Yeah.
I didn't want to shade the answers one way or another. And I wanted to challenge thought process. If you do that and your process is pure as far as doing that, you know, you can't control every decision. You can control your thought process, and you can control how you get to that flashpoint crossroads decision. That you have a lot of different controls on. Okay, how it turns out, dealing with human beings, so it can turn out anyway, from 1 to 100, anywhere in between. But the more process you have, and the more experience you have, and the more experience you pull in, and iron sharpen iron, the more times you do that to get to that decision, the more times you're going to be satisfied with the decision. Most wrong decisions are made in a hurry.
Yep.
Most wrong decisions are made emotional. And that's, you got to stay away from that. Emotion can never get into it. A player in baseball is 0 for 30. Guess who was like 0 for 30? I'll give you two guys that were like 1 for 28 and 0 for a lot. One guy was named Willie Mays. You may have heard of Willie Mays. The other guy was Ryan Sandberg. You may have heard of Ryan Sandberg. You can't do that. Look at Greg Maddox's early careers with the Cubs. ERAs in the 5s, losing more games than he won.
Yeah.
It takes time. You have to be patient with it and understand what you're looking at and who's inside the uniform.
Wow, folks, I hope you're taking notes, man, because there's some great stuff. You know, you mentioned Pepperdine. I'm thinking that when you said professor at Pepperdine, I can see why you're a very good professor at Pepperdine. And I'll tell you why. Take this as a compliment, because you remember the movie Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield, one of my favorite movies. And the reason I bring it up, because, you know, that's what Rodney was doing is building the street smart that he had as a youngster. And trying to teach you what really works out there in the real world. Yes, you can apply some of the stuff that you learn at school. I went to Mickey Owen Baseball School for 10 years. Why do I think I became a good instructor, good coach? Because at that time, 10 years, I was with a lot of good coaches and I was on the field. I wasn't reading books. I wasn't videos. I could have, and I should have probably, would have helped me also. But the on-field stuff is what really helped me. And growing up in, like you said, in a tough area, I think that helped also. You also said leadership. Now, for years, I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, you had Lasorda was your only manager, right?
No, I didn't. Tommy was kind of a consultant when I got to LA. My managers, I had Grady Little for 2 years, Joe Torre for 3 years, and Don Mattingly for 5 years.
And my question, because I was going to bring that up, the quality, first two questions. One, when you select a manager, what are you looking for? And two, the quality some of those people had, obviously, were things you were looking for.
Well, again, the manager and the GM have to have the tightest relationship in the organization. They're going to see things differently sometimes. A manager is going to see it today. Yeah. I got to figure out how I'm going to win today's game.
Right.
The GM goes, yeah, we got to figure out how to win today's game. And I got to think about tomorrow and a week from tomorrow. and next month and next year and 3 years and 5 years. And I never hired a manager. They were all good. They all turned out really good. We have 1 year under 500 in my 9 by 1 game. And that was when we were going through bankruptcy and all kinds of different ownership stuff. In my Giant career, from 97, I think from 1990, for 23 years, 24 years, 2 teams finished under 500.
Wow.
That's hard to do.
That's incredible.
But we let the managers manage. I would have a conversation with the manager, maybe 1 o'clock for a 7 o'clock game. Give me some thoughts. What are you thinking? What about this? What about that? If there was a move made the night before that I didn't agree with, I didn't go running down to the clubhouse right away and challenge the thought process and this and that. If I had to do that, I'd hired the wrong person. That wasn't their fault. That would have been my fault.
Yeah.
So I needed to sleep on my anger and my frustration, or whatever words you want to use, and then go into it the next day and say, hey, explain this to me. Just want to know. Never called the dugout. Never told anybody, got to play this person, don't play that person. Sometimes I'd say, I'd like you to consider this. Think about this. You do whatever you think is right. That's why I've hired you. You make those decisions. But in the game of baseball, because of the schedule, you have to have people who can communicate and who can talk to people, who can talk to players. Dave Roberts has done a phenomenal job in LA in the last 5-6 years that he's been there. Absolutely phenomenal. And he's really good when the game starts and till the game's over. But he's even better from when the game's over till when the game starts the next day, in managing people and managing personalities. All of that stuff is so vital. It is so vital. Managers years ago would get paid to manage from about, on a night game, 6 o'clock till midnight. Managers now get paid 24 hours a day for what they do. Mm-hmm. With so many different things that they're entrusted with. So you have to have people that are open to that and who think like that, and who can get along with people.
I love that you keep going back to the people skills, because again, it's a people skills game. What about this? I was with the Schaumburg Flyers for a while, and at small scale, I did what general manager would do in the big leagues, make some trades, pick players, sign contracts, but a very small scale, obviously. But one of the things I was always trying to do, communicate with the manager all the time, like you were talking about, but also looking at the team, what they need, because what you have during the season may not get you to the playoffs, or if it does get you to the playoffs, may not get you to win the whole thing. So I was always trying to figure out what little thing we need without messing up with the chemistry aspect of it too. Talk a little bit how you dealt with that.
It's a great point. There are some players that are really good till you get to August.
Yeah.
Whether it's the lights get too bright, or whether it's just the wear and tear of playing the first 120 games. There's some players that just kind of go through it the first 120 games, and the lights get brighter and they get stronger, and they can't wait for opportunity. Some people are afraid of challenge. Other people look at challenge as motivation. You have to figure out who they are, and how they're gonna be. And not everybody is the way they're always going to be. There's some fluctuation. There's somebody that maybe has not been a good postseason performer, or is a little bit shaky as the season goes on. But you see that there's a willingness to try and adjust and change. So you have to be patient with it. Be communicative always, and patient always. Patience is another attribute that few people want to really listen about.
Yeah.
But it's about 1 million years old. The saying, patience is a virtue. And you know why they say that? Because it is.
Yeah.
It's a very huge virtue. But think about watching a game a day, or it's 162 games in 183 days. You're evaluating always. And if you make a mistake because Willie Mays went 0 for 20 and Ryan Sandberg went 1 for 28 to start their careers, or Greg Maddux had a 6-14 record early in his days with an ERA in the 5s, this guy's out. I'm done. I've already seen enough.
Yeah.
Make a bad mistake. You got to have the patience with it. So you've got to have patience with your staff. Anybody. You got to have patience with your family.
Yeah.
You got to communicate. People don't like tough conversations. People stay away from what they would consider conflicted conversations. As long as they're respectful, I think conflictive conversations are how you get better. If you think you got everything figured out and nobody can ever tell you anything, well, good luck with that one.
Yeah.
You know?
Hey, Ned, I want to respect your time. And
Yeah.
here's why I want to close it off. Two things. One, because you keep bringing up key points, and man, I could be on this for 5 hours because I love it. I mean, it's just great because there's a lot to learn on what it takes, not only be a GM at the big league level, but just to succeed in life in general. One of the things would be, I want to end it with two things: the big chair, the book you wrote. You also have some charities. I believe one was around Santo's charity. I want people to know about that because you mentioned charities earlier and we didn't talk about it. But the other thing is, I'd like to go back just for a second when it comes to releasing a player or trading a player. Just let the folks know because we saw Moneyball, how that's handled in some ways.
Yeah.
Movie too. Does the GM do that? Does somebody else do it? How's that handled? And you talked about the truth.
I always did it.
Yeah.
Because I felt that it needed to come from me, the message. And a lot of times when you release a player, and I've had to release a lot of veterans that had tremendous careers. And, it comes through conversation and relationship that doesn't just start the day you say, hey, I got to see you in the office. It's got to be set forth well before that, where you say, you know what, how you feeling? How's this? How's that? I see that your bat's a little slow right now. You're doing okay. And, it's a tough thing to have that conversation because people have been playing, they're 40 years old. They've probably been playing at the top of the world for 30 years.
Yeah.
And and I'll tell them, I said, look, I'm the messenger, but the league is telling you what I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
The competition is kind of telling you what I'm verifying, not easy, but always respectful. And I've had a varying degree of reactions. Some guys cry, some are really agitated with it, come back and a couple of days later and they're fine and they're respectful and they give you a hug and they're sorry for what they did, I guess. But most take it in the middle and say, I get it. Trades are tough, especially when you trade young players. I was able to acquire Hanley Ramirez from Florida a few years ago, and I had to trade Nathan Eovaldi, who was one of my favorite young players. I just loved how he attacked the game, and he was a pitcher, a little bit of arm trouble here and there. Ended up having a great World Series for Boston in '18 when they beat the Dodgers, and so that's not easy. Blake DeWitt, somebody I traded to the Cubs, just a great relationship and affinity. A trade means that they're not going to be with the team that they were with. It doesn't mean you don't like them. Sometimes it means somebody just likes them more.
Yeah.
Or you need to fix the spot on your club. It's not always easy, but if you've had a decent relationship or at least an open relationship and they understand thought process, I think it goes hand in hand with anybody else who runs any company. If you don't talk to your employees, if you don't have relationship with people, and then one day you're just going to fire them or reassign them, that's hard. That's hard for them to take. If they understand it and they know that you're doing the best you can and they understand how you think and how you prepare and the different things you look for and you think, that doesn't make, maybe the financial end of it, if you're getting let go, different, but at least you have a little bit of a piece to know, hey, you know what, I may not agree, but I do understand. And if you don't have the communication, you're not going to have either. And so, those are tough moments you have to have. But when you sign up for the gig, you're going to have tough days. Roland Heeman, the great White Sox general manager, one of my dearest friends, he told me when I got to GM, like John Sherholtz, when he called me, Roland called me and he says, here's my advice for you. He said, I've known you since you were like 20 years old, and this is great. It took you 30 years to get there. This is wonderful. He said, celebrate the great days, celebrate the wins, because you're going to have enough of the other stuff to make you wonder why you're doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. And you talk about Roland Heeman, God bless him. What a great person. And talk about a listener. Talk about a listener, but the guy that listens and he treats. And I know you're the same way, because when I was in in China watching you guys, the Dodger Padre game. You know, here you are, you got things to do, but yeah, you took the time to say hi to me and talk to me at that time. And then Roland's the same way. And it's just quality people.
Well, I'll wrap up here with a little bit of charities, a little bit about the big chair, and then a closing idea, if it's okay.
Yep.
Again, we've talked about how I grew up. It would be selfish of me not to give back, whether it's teaching, whether it's financial resources. In LA, there's some great places, institution called A Place Called Home, which takes a lot of inner city kids that parents may have been gang members. They don't have a college background. And they give students a chance to come to a place after school and learn, and to learn another language, perhaps if they come speaking one language that isn't the primary language. Wonderful place. I've helped a lot of kids get through college there, maybe 20, 25 with different conversations. And all of them, it's not just writing a check. That's obviously helpful, but I would not write a check to anybody who I didn't stay in touch with. So I needed a monthly check-in from them. How you doing? What do you got going on? Any challenges? Anything I could help you think through? That's one. Get Lit is another one that does a lot of the same things with teaching kids literacy, how to read, how to write, how to express them things. It's done by Diane and Tim Lane here in LA, and they've done this out of their kitchen for about 15 years. And so many kids have gone on to acting careers and college and things like that, who had limited opportunity before this. But when you think about literacy and you think about reading and writing and where that may be at in society as far as the ability to do it, Diane and Tim have taken more than a decade of their own time. It's a non-for-profit and have helped hundreds of kids in Los Angeles. The Ron Santo Foundation for Diabetes. I worked with Guide Dogs of America to help those visually impaired to have a service animal. And Vicky Santo came to me a couple months after Ron died, who was my favorite player growing up. And I told you about the Alan Joe's Delicatessen, where my dad ran to credit on Wednesday till Friday when he got paid. I met Ronnie in there when I was like 9 or 10 years old. He came in there to buy some prosciutto, and and we became buddies till the day he died. So diabetic, and so they also have service dogs that help people with diabetes, especially young people. And so she came to me with this idea, and she's taken it. I probably took it 5 yards. She took it 95 yards and made it tremendous. And so that means a lot too. And then the last one is Vision to Learn, which was started by a gentleman, Austin Butner, who's very philanthropic here in LA, from Michigan originally, and ran the LA school district until the last couple of days, almost on a volunteer basis. Didn't do it because he was making a financial windfall, did it because of his love for children. So he came up with this idea that he got the Dodgers and myself involved, and right out of the gate, we were having dinner one night. And he says, I need some help. I need a Dodger player or two that will speak about having difficulty seeing, and maybe they wear glasses. And he said, because I've done research, and a lot of children have problems in school, and then the schoolroom may be overcrowded, and the teacher can't handle it, and the teacher, sends in a report. Next thing you know, they've given the kid something to take to calm the kid down, when maybe all it would be the ability to see the board.
Wow.
And I've helped him do that. He's one of those people that when he says he's going to do something, and you say that's pretty lofty, he'll be like a mile above it in another year. He's in probably 40 or 50 different cities now, started in LA, hundreds of thousands of eyeglasses. I've seen kids 8 years old put on a pair of glasses for the first time and look at a tree and be shocked.
That's amazing.
Of leaves on a tree. And so those are the things I devote a lot of time, a lot of effort to. And very soon here, I have a special needs granddaughter with autism. And so I'm starting to, that'll be my next foray, is to really help people become aware of it, and to help young people have a chance at an outstanding life through with autism. Last thing, Big Chair. I
Yes.
wrote The Big Chair by accident. Ended up being a best-selling book for 22 weeks in the top 10, and as a baseball book, sports leadership book, sports autobiography. The Big Chair. When the GM thing ended, I went from 18, 19-hour days to all this free time. I needed some structure. I needed something to do. I had all these wonderful people I had met through the years and different experiences. I just decided to start writing them down. So every night from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., I'd write 5 nights a week, almost journaling, maybe high-end journaling. And I ran into, at a restaurant, former Chicago sports columnist named David Israel. Ran into David Israel. Was at the Tribune for a long time, very talented writer, lives in LA now. Walking through a restaurant one night, he goes, "Hey, come over here. I got to introduce you to somebody." Go over there. He says, "I need you to meet David Bigliano." I say, "Hey, David, how are you?" And David Bigliano goes, "I know you. I know your career. You've had a pretty good ride." I said, "It's been wonderful." And David Israel looks at his buddy and he says, "If this guy ever decides to write a book, you've got to represent him."
Wow.
And he says, "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" I said, "Well, I'm 425 pages in right now." He goes, "What?" I go, "No." He says, who's representing you?" I said, "Nobody. I'm not selling it. I just wrote it to write it."
Wow.
And one thing led to another, and Random House took it. Kerry Colin was a tremendous editor. And a year and a half later, it was on the shelves and bestseller for 22 weeks. Kind of by accident, had no intent.
And talk about perfect timing. You mentioned timing earlier. That couldn't have been any better timing. Ned, listen, you've been awesome. I've taken you way past your time, folks. I took him a lot longer than he should have been on. Can't thank you enough. Just want to wish you the best. God bless you. And any endeavor you get into is going to be awesome. Folks, hopefully you learned a lot about giving also, because, Ned gives a lot. So thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. I got one more quick thing to say.
Hey, it's your show. No problem.
I also teach 3 words that are massive. And I think the more we can all live them, the better. They are kindness, gratitude, and grace. The world takes on those traits. Be kind to people, be grateful, offer grace. I'll be in a better spot than we are today. Thank you so much for thinking of me and having me on, Peter.
Love it. Thanks, Ned. What a great way to end it. Thank you to Ned Colletti. Thanks to Brian Crocker, producer with the Lineup Media Group. Thank you to everybody in the U.S. and around the world. Don't forget baseballoutsidethebox.com. Subscribe. Hey, everybody, stay healthy. Be back on the baseball field soon. God bless you all, and we'll see you on the next show. Hang on.